The air in the grand hall was thick enough to taste, a mixture of alien ozone and palpable desperation. On one side of the obsidian table sat Lady Zilia Vexis, matriarch of a dying house, her predatory grace barely concealing the weight of her world. Her golden, feline eyes, which had witnessed the death of her mate and the decline of her dynasty, were fixed on the man opposite her. He was a human, a creature of soft skin and baffling resilience, a xenobotanist named Dr. Heirs Thorne. He looked utterly out of place, a simple field researcher summoned before royalty. With the future of her lineage hanging by a thread, she finally spoke, her voice a low, commanding purr that sent shivers through her retainers. My proposition is simple, human. I need a mate, and you need strong heirs. The planet Catharos orbited a binary star system, bathing the formidable, angular architecture of its cities in a perpetual twilight of gold and crimson. It was a world of warriors, of rigid tradition and unyielding honor. And in this world, honor was a currency House Vexis was rapidly running out of. Lady Zilia Vexis stood on the balcony of her ancestral spire, the biting wind whipping strands of her silver-streaked dark hair across her high cheekbones. Her people, the Cathar, were a formidable race, tall, powerfully built, with skin tones that ranged from deep ebony to pale grey, often adorned with subtle hereditary markings. Hers were faint silver lines that traced the contours of her face, marks of a lineage stretching back 1,000 cycles. A lineage that would end with her. Her mate, the great Lord Heirs, had fallen 6 cycles ago on the blasted plains of Cygnus X1, defending the Cathar hegemony from a Zelosian incursion. He had died a hero, his name etched into the monoliths of remembrance. But heroes left widows, and in Cathar society, a house without a male heir was a ship taking on water. Her political rivals, chief among them the smug and calculating Lord Caelan of the rival House Drock, were circling like carrion birds, waiting for House Vexis to finally sink so they could pick its bones clean. She needed an heir, a strong one. But Cathar genetics were notoriously fickle. Mating with another noble house would mean a political alliance that would effectively see her house absorbed. Mating with a lesser Cathar would produce an heir Caelan could easily challenge as genetically insufficient. She was trapped. Her seneschal, a stern but loyal female named Lyra, had brought her the solution, a radical, almost heretical one. It came from a captured Xylosian data core, decrypted by hegemony intelligence. The report spoke of a lesser species, one considered non-threatening and primitive, yet possessing a startling degree of genetic adaptability: humans. Their chaotic, messy genome was a wellspring of biological resilience. A human-Cathar hybrid, the report speculated, could be potent, unpredictably so. There was one such human on Catharos, a scientist, Dr. Heirs Thorne, contracted by Terragen Dynamics to study the planet's unique crystalline flora. He was a non-entity, a creature of no political standing, which made him perfect. His contribution would be purely biological. He would be a sire, nothing more. The summons were delivered by Zelia's imposing house guard, their crimson armor gleaming under the twin suns. Heirs Thorne had expected a complaint about his survey drones straying too close to the city limits. He certainly didn't expect to be escorted through cavernous halls of polished obsidian to the personal audience chamber of the planet's most powerful widow. He stood before her now, a man of average height with tired, intelligent eyes and the calloused hands of someone who worked with both soil and datapads. He wore a practical, worn field jacket over a plain grey shirt, a stark contrast to the opulent, severe attire of the Cathar. "Dr. Thorne," Zilia began, her voice resonating with command. She did not ask him to sit. "I have reviewed your species' biological profile. You are remarkable, durable, genetically pliable." Aris raised an eyebrow. "We have our moments. We're also remarkably good at complaining about paperwork. To what do I owe the honor, Lady Vexis?" His tone was calm, betraying no intimidation. He had spent years in the galactic fringe. A room full of 7-foot-tall warriors was just another Tuesday. Zilia dispensed with all pretense. There was no time for it. "My house is on the verge of collapse. My mate is dead. I require an heir to secure my lineage and stabilize my political standing." She paused, her golden eyes locking onto his. The weight of her stare was a physical force. "My proposition is simple, human. I need a mate, and you need strong heirs. I am offering you a contract. You will sire a child with me. In return, House Vexes will grant you wealth beyond the dreams of your species. You will be provided for, protected, and when your service is no longer required, you will be returned to your home system with a fortune that will make you a king." She saw the flicker in his eyes and assumed it was avarice, the universal motivator. She continued, laying out the cold, hard terms. "The child will be Cathar. They will be raised as my heir, bearing my name and the legacy of my house. Your genetic contribution is all that is required. You will have no paternal claim, no say in their upbringing. You will be a biological donor. Nothing more." The silence that followed was heavy. The guards shifted, their armor clinking softly. Lyra, the seneschal, watched the human, expecting him to stammer, to grovel, to immediately accept this unbelievable offer. Aris Thorne remained silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He looked from her to the cavernous ceiling and back again. Finally, a small, wry smile touched his lips. It was this smile, so out of place in this hall of grim finality, that was the first sign that things were about to go very, very wrong for Lady Zilia's carefully laid plans. "No," Aris Thorne said. The word was quiet, yet it echoed in the cavernous hall like a physical blow. The guards straightened, their hands instinctively moving to the hilts of their ceremonial blades. Lyra's eyes widened in disbelief. Lady Zilia herself recoiled slightly, her regal composure cracking for the first time. No one said no to the matriarch of House Vexes. "Explain yourself, human," she hissed, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Do you not comprehend the magnitude of my offer?" "Oh, I comprehend it perfectly," Oris replied, his tone still maddeningly calm. He took a step forward, a breach of protocol that made the guards tense further. "You want to use me like you'd use a prize bull, a stud service. You're offering me a fortune to provide genetic material and then disappear. It's a fantastic offer if I were selling a prize-winning Grox beast. But I'm not." He met her furious gaze without flinching. "The one thing my remarkably durable species values, Lady Vexis, is agency. We don't just create children, we raise them. We don't just pass on genes, we pass on knowledge, values, stories. Love. You're not just asking for a biological sample. You're asking for a piece of my soul, and you're trying to buy it like a mineral right." Zilia was stunned into silence. Her entire worldview was built on lineage, legacy, and the pragmatic continuation of a bloodline. The emotional, sentimental component the human was describing was a foreign concept, a weakness. "You speak of sentiment," she finally managed, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "This is about survival." "It's always about survival," Aris countered. "But there are different ways to survive. You want to survive the next political cycle. I'm thinking about the survival of a person, a child, my child. Lord Caelan, who had been observing from a shadowed alcove with the other council members, chose this moment to step forward. He was sleek and cruel, a smirk perpetually playing on his thin lips. "The creature is impertinent, my lady," Caelan purred, his voice dripping with condescension. "It thinks it has a right to bargain. Perhaps a lesson in Cathar etiquette is in order." Zilia shot him a look that could have flayed skin. "This is my hall, Caelan. I will conduct my own affairs." She turned back to Oris, a dangerous curiosity overriding her anger. "What then are your terms, if you dare to have them?" This was it, the moment of truth. Aris took a deep breath. "My terms are not for a sire, but for a partner," he stated, his voice ringing with newfound conviction. "If we do this, we do it together. I will not be a footnote in my child's history. I will be their father." He began to pace slowly, his words painting a picture she could never have conceived. "The child will bear your name, yes. They will be heir to your house. But they will also know mine. They will learn of Earth, of Shakespeare and Newton, of human history and art. They will learn our values of compassion and curiosity to temper the Cathar honor and strength." He stopped and faced her directly. "I will not live in your shadow. I will have a voice on your council, not as a ruler, but as a consort and an advisor. My expertise is not in warfare, but in life sciences. Your house is failing, not just politically, but economically. Your agricultural yields are pathetic. Your people are growing restless. I can fix that. I can make your house strong from the ground up, not just through a single heir." He let his final, most outrageous demand hang in the air. "And we will be mated under Cathar law, not just a biological contract, a true binding union. You need an heir, Lady Vexis. But what you truly need is an ally. I'm offering to be one. You are not buying a stud. You are gaining a partner. And my child will have a father." The hall was utterly, profoundly silent. Caelan was openly laughing now, a harsh, grating sound. "He is mad. The primitive thinks he can be consort to a high lady of the Cathar. This is the greatest joke I have heard in a century." The other council members murmured in agreement, their faces a mixture of scorn and shock. Lyra looked at her lady, her expression pleading with her to dismiss the human, to have him thrown in the dungeons for his audacity. But Zilia wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Eris Thorn. She saw no fear in his eyes, no greed, only a solid, unshakable resolve. He wasn't trying to trick her or usurp her. He was offering help. He was offering a foundation. He had looked at her broken house and seen not just a missing heir, but the crumbling pillars beneath. Her mind raced. The political fallout would be catastrophic. Mating a human? An alien? Caelan would have a field day. But the alternative was a slow, certain death for her house. This human, this maddeningly logical, audacious man, was offering a lifeline she hadn't even known she needed. He offered strength, not just in blood, but in substance. Against the laughter of her rivals, against the horrified pleas of her advisers, against every instinct of her proud Cathar heart, she made a decision. "Your terms are unprecedented," she said, her voice cutting through the noise and silencing the hall. "They are an insult to 1,000 cycles of tradition." She paused, letting the tension build. "I will consider them." Caelan's laughter died in his throat. The stunning reply had not been Aris's no, but his audacious counteroffer. And the true shock, the one that sent ripples of disbelief through the Cathar elite, was that Lady Zilia Vexis was actually listening. The days that followed Zilia's shocking pronouncement were a maelstrom of political maneuvering and barely concealed hostility. Lord Calen formally lodged a protest with the Hegemony High Council, decrying Xilia's consideration of a primitive alien as a potential mate. House Drock's propaganda machine went into overdrive, painting the human as a corrupting influence, a harbinger of galactic impurity. Within House Vexus, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The staff treated Heirs like a particularly volatile, unexploded bomb. They obeyed Xilia's orders to grant him access and provisions, but they watched him with suspicion and contempt. The chief of security, a grizzled, one-eyed veteran named Vorlag, shadowed Heirs personally, his massive form a constant, intimidating presence. Heirs, for his part, ignored the glares and whispers. He knew he had to prove his worth, not with words, but with action. He had made a bold claim about strengthening the house from the ground up, and now he had to deliver. He started with the hydroponics and agricultural domes. House Vexes, like much of Catharos, relied on nutrient pastes derived from hardy but low-yield native fungi. The process was inefficient, and recent blight had cut production by nearly 30%, a fact Xilia's administration had been desperately trying to conceal. Heirs spent days in the climate-controlled domes, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and ozone. He took soil samples, analyzed atmospheric composition, and cross-referenced the data with Cathar biology. Vorlag stood by the entrance, arms crossed over his armored chest, his single eye missing nothing. "Your crops are starving," Heirs declared one evening, standing before Xilia and her council in the strategy chamber. He held up a datapad, displaying a complex molecular diagram. "You're feeding them a diet of pure nitrogen and carbon compounds. It's like a human trying to live on bread and water. They survive, but they don't thrive." He projected a new diagram. Human agricultural science focuses on micronutrients, trace elements, boron, zinc, manganese. Your soil is rich in them, but the Cathar fungi can't absorb them. They lack the necessary root enzymes. Lyra the Seneschal scoffed. "Our methods have fed us for generations, humans. Do you think we are fools?" "Not fools, just stagnant," Heirs replied calmly, meeting her gaze. "Tradition is a wonderful thing, until it becomes a cage. I'm proposing a way to open the door." He outlined his plan. Using Terragen Dynamics' proprietary gene splicing technology, the very reason he was on this side of the galaxy, he could introduce a simple enzymatic sequence from a Terran root vegetable into the Cathar fungi. It was a minor adjustment, one that would allow the crops to absorb the untapped nutrients in their own soil. The result, Heirs concluded, would be a 50, perhaps 60% increase in yield within a single growth cycle. The blight resistance would skyrocket. Your house would not only be self-sufficient, it would have a massive surplus. Food is power, Lady Vexus, more so than warships. The council was silent. The idea was radical, tampering with the purity of their ancestral food source. But the numbers on the datapad were undeniable. Their food reserves were dwindling. Calen was already exploiting the shortage, selling his own house's surplus at exorbitant prices, strangling Vexes slowly. Xilia studied Heirs, her golden eyes narrowed in thought. This was the substance he had promised. He wasn't just offering a child, he was offering a future for her entire house. He was using his mind, his uniquely human perspective, to solve a problem her people had been unable to see. "Do it!" she commanded, ignoring the gasps from her council. "Vorlag, give Dr. Thorne whatever he requires. See that he is not disturbed." Vorlag grunted, an affirmative, a flicker of something new in his eye. It wasn't respect, not yet, but it was a grudging acknowledgement. Over the next few weeks, Heirs worked tirelessly. He and a small team of skeptical Cathar technicians retrofitted one of the smaller domes. He taught them human sterile field protocols and the delicate art of micrografting. The Cathar, used to grand gestures and brute force, were clumsy at first, but they were disciplined and learned quickly. During this time, a strange routine developed between Aris and Zilia. She would visit the domes in the evenings after her political battles were done for the day. She would stand in the humid air, watching him work, a silent, regal figure amidst the hum of machinery. They began to talk, not about politics or contracts, but about their pasts. He told her about his late wife, Eleanor, a fellow scientist who had died in a shuttle accident years ago. He spoke of his quiet grief, the way her absence had hollowed out his life and driven him to the far corners of the galaxy, seeking solace in his work. Zilia, in turn, spoke of Heirs. She spoke not of the great warrior, but of the male she had known since childhood, of his booming laugh and the way he'd always brought her the first bloom of the crystalline shadow orchid each cycle. In the shared space of their grief, a fragile bridge began to form. They were two lonely souls, a widow and a widower, bound by a desperate, unconventional pact. The unspoken contract was no longer just about survival. It was about finding a way to live again. One night, as the first modified fungal sprouts began to push through the enriched soil, Zilia found Aris staring at the tiny green shoots, a weary but satisfied smile on his face. "You have a creator's touch, Aris Thorn," she said softly, using his given name for the first time. "I'm just a gardener, Zilia," he replied, turning to her. "But sometimes a gardener is what a kingdom needs most." She felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest. It was a dangerous feeling, one she hadn't allowed herself to experience since Kairos' death. This human, with his quiet confidence and radical ideas, was chipping away at the icy fortress she had built around her heart. But as the first signs of success began to show, a shadow fell over their progress. A series of accidents began to plague the main agricultural domes. A primary nutrient pump failed. A whole section of atmospheric regulators mysteriously malfunctioned, scorching a crop. These were dismissed as equipment fatigue. Aris, however, was not so sure. He recognized the patterns. They were too precise, too targeted. It felt less like random failure and more like a warning. Someone was sending a message. Someone didn't want the gardener to succeed. The success of the test dome was undeniable. The modified fungi grew with a vigor the Cathar technicians had never seen, their stalks thick and their caps a vibrant, healthy blue instead of the usual pale grey. The initial bioscans projected a yield even higher than Aris's optimistic 60% estimate. Whispers of the human's miracle began to spread through the lower ranks of House Vexis, a current of hope in a sea of despair. Zilia, buoyed by this success, officially announced her intention to enter into a formal mating contract with Dr. Heirs Thorn. The announcement sent shockwaves through the hegemony. Lord Kaelin's denunciations reached a fever pitch. He called for a vote of no confidence in Zilia, claiming she had been bewitched by an alien charlatan, that her grief had finally broken her mind. It was in this charged atmosphere that the true sabotage began. It happened overnight. Aris was awoken by a frantic comm from one of the dome technicians. He and Vorlag rushed to the main hydroponics facility to find a scene of utter devastation. The entire primary dome, which housed the first large-scale crop of the new fungi, was ruined. A caustic, silvery substance had been introduced into the main irrigation reservoir, poisoning the water supply. The miracle crop was now a field of wilted, melting sludge, releasing a foul, acrid smell. Zilia arrived moments later, her face a mask of cold fury. This was no accident. This was a direct attack, a dagger to the heart of her house's nascent recovery. "Kaelan!" she spat, her hands clenched into fists. "He would see my people starve before he allowed me to succeed." "It's his style," Vorlog growled, his one eye scanning the perimeter for any clue. "Cowardly. He hits your food supply, your finances. He won't risk open conflict." Aris, however, was kneeling by the contaminated reservoir, running a field analysis with his Omni tool. "Maybe," he said, not looking up. "But this is sloppy." Sloppy. Lyra the Seneschal had arrived and scoffed at the word. "It seems brutally effective to me, human." "No, it's theatrical," Aris countered, standing up. "This compound, it's a xylosian industrial solvent, highly corrosive and very easy to trace. If Kaelan wanted to do this cleanly, he would have used a biological agent, something that would look like a return of the blight. This? This is designed to be found. It's designed to scream sabotage." "What are you implying?" Zilia asked, her gaze sharp. "I'm implying that Kaelan wants you to know it was him. He's taunting you. He's trying to provoke you into a rash action, a formal accusation you can't prove. If you challenge him without ironclad evidence, the High Council will see it as paranoia and instability. It would strengthen his case against you." The cold human logic of it settled over them. Aris was right. It was a political trap, laid with agricultural poison. "Then we will find his proof," Zilia declared. "Vorlag, lock down the facility. I want every worker interrogated. Check every access log for the last 48 hours. The investigation began, but it was clear they were at a disadvantage. Kaelan's agent would have covered their tracks. They were looking for a ghost. This crisis, however, forged a new dynamic between Aris and Zilia. They were no longer just a potential couple in a political arrangement. They were partners in a war. They spent hours together in the strategy chamber, poring over security footage and personnel files. Aris brought his scientific mind to the problem, analyzing possibilities, looking for statistical anomalies in guard patrols and supply shipments. Zilia provided the political context, identifying individuals with potential loyalties to House Drock or those who held grudges against her family. During one of these late-night sessions, surrounded by holographic displays, Zilia looked at Aris, a deep weariness in her eyes. "Kairos was the warrior," she said quietly. "He would have met Kaelan on the field of honor and settled this with blades. I only know how to hold what he won. I don't know how to fight like this, in the shadows." Aris powered down the display he was looking at and turned to her. "You don't have to fight like him. Kaelan is playing chess. Kairos would have tried to flip the table over. You and I, we can win the game." He pointed to a personnel file he had flagged, a low-level cargo loader named Rorik. "This man's daughter has a rare respiratory illness. The treatment is astronomically expensive. For the last 2 months, Rorik has been making payments to the medical guild that far exceed his salary. The payments started the week after Kaelan first publicly denounced our potential union. It was a thread, a tiny, insignificant thread, but it was a start. Vorlag will persuade him to talk," Zilia said, a hard edge to her voice. "No," Aris said firmly. "That's the old way. That's Kaelan's way. Let me talk to him. Let's offer him a better deal." Zilia hesitated, her instincts warring with his counsel. Her entire life, problems like this were solved with intimidation and force. Aris was proposing empathy. She relented. Aris, with Vorlag as a silent, hulking observer, met with the cargo loader. He didn't threaten him. He showed him the evidence of the payments and simply asked why. He spoke about his own losses, about the desperation that drives people to do things they normally wouldn't. He offered a deal, full immunity, and House Vexis would cover his daughter's medical care for life. In exchange, he had to tell them everything. The loader, Rorik, broke down. He confessed that he'd been approached by an agent of House Drock. He hadn't been the saboteur himself, but he had used his access codes to allow the real agent to enter the hydroponics facility undetected, disabling a specific set of security sensors for a 10-minute window. He never saw the agent's face, only a cloaked figure. But he gave them the exact time and location. It was the proof they needed. It wasn't enough to convict Kalen, but it was enough to prove a conspiracy. Cross-referencing the disabled sensors with the internal guard roster, they found only one person who was on patrol in that sector during that specific window. A guard with known gambling debts, recently paid off by an anonymous source. They had their saboteur. Zelia presented the evidence to her council. The guard was brought in, and, faced with the irrefutable data, he confessed to being hired by House Drock. It was a victory, a small one, but a crucial one. It silenced some of the dissent within her own house and forced Kalen onto the defensive. For the first time, Zelia had not just defended her position, but advanced it. And she had done it not with a sword, but with the quiet, analytical mind of her chosen human mate. That night, she found him on the balcony, looking up at the twin suns. "You have given me a victory, Oris Thorn," she said, standing beside him. "We earned it together," he corrected her. She looked at him, at the man who had seen the brokenness in her house and had begun, piece by piece, to repair it. The man who fought with logic and compassion instead of rage and steel. The cold, calculated contract they had made felt like a distant memory. In the crimson and gold light of the Cathar sky, she reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm, soft but strong. It was a gesture of profound significance for a Cathar leader, an admission of partnership, of equality. It was an acceptance of not just his terms, but of him. "Perhaps," she whispered, her voice losing its regal edge and becoming something much more vulnerable. "My seneschal was right. A human Cathar union could be potent." The exposure of the saboteur sent a clear message to the Cathar hegemony. House Vexis was not as weak as it appeared, and its new human advisor was far more than a mere genetic donor. Lord Kalen was forced to issue a public denial of any involvement, his fury barely masked by a veneer of aristocratic outrage. The victory solidified Zelia's position and gave Aris a measure of genuine respect among the Vex's council. Even Vorlag started referring to him as consort-to-be instead of the human, a significant shift in the grizzled warrior's lexicon. With the immediate threat neutralized, Aris threw himself back into restoring the agricultural domes. He redesigned the security protocols, implementing a multi-layered system of biometric scanners and chemical sensors of his own design, making a repeat of the sabotage nearly impossible. The Cathar technicians now followed his instructions with an eager efficiency, their earlier skepticism replaced by admiration. The mating contract was formally signed and sanctified in a private ceremony, a stark, solemn affair, witnessed only by the Vexis Council and a glaring Vorlag. There was no pomp, no celebration, only the weight of a pact that would forever alter the course of Cathar history. In the weeks that followed, a new and surprising intimacy grew between Oris and Zelia. Their late-night strategy sessions evolved into quiet conversations. They shared meals, debated philosophy, the rigid Cathar code of honor versus the fluid, often contradictory ethics of humanity, and discovered a shared, dry sense of humor. Aris learned that beneath Zelia's icy exterior was a brilliant strategist with a deep love for her people. Zilia found that beneath Aris's calm, scientific demeanor was a core of unyielding integrity and a profound capacity for kindness. The arrangement, born of desperation, was beginning to feel like a true partnership. The cold calculus of survival was being slowly replaced by the warm algebra of affection. Then came the news that changed everything. The House Vexis Med Prime, a stern Cathar with piercing diagnostic eyes, delivered the report to Zilia and Aris in the privacy of the matriarch's star. "The biological markers are confirmed, my lady," the doctor stated, her voice flat and professional. "You are with a child. The gestation is proceeding as expected. The hybrid genetic matrix appears stable and robust." Zilia sank into her chair, a hand going to her abdomen. A lifetime of duty, a year of desperate gambles had all led to this. An heir, a future for House Vexis, a child of her blood, and the blood of the strange, remarkable human beside her. She looked at Aris, and the smile that broke across her usually stoic face was like the twin suns rising. Aris felt a surge of emotion that stunned him. He had approached this as a duty, a means to an end, a way to honor his own deep-seated need to create a family after losing Elena. But hearing the news, seeing the radiant joy on Zilia's face, made it real in a way he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just an heir, it was his son or daughter. Their celebration, however, was short-lived. The news of the pregnancy, which they had intended to keep secret for as long as possible, was somehow leaked to the public. Within an hour, it was the talk of the entire hegemony. And it was the weapon Lord Kalen had been waiting for. He no longer needed to attack their food supply. He now had a target he could assault with the far more potent weapon of ideology. He framed the pregnancy not as a miracle for a dying house, but as a contamination of the entire Cathar species. A half-blood, his speeches thundered across the public channels, a genetic mongrel born of a grieving, misguided woman and an inferior species. This is not an heir, it is an abomination. It cannot be allowed to inherit the legacy of a noble house. It is a perversion of all we hold sacred. He played on the deepest fears of his people, fear of the unknown, fear of change, xenophobia. He invoked ancient laws, long-dormant purity codes that spoke of the sanctity of the Cathar bloodline. He was no longer just attacking House Vexis, he was launching a crusade. The glimmer of hope that the pregnancy had brought was now overshadowed by a gathering storm of doubt and fear. Support for Kalen swelled. Even houses that had been neutral began to murmur in agreement. The idea of a half-human heir was simply too radical for many to accept. Within House Vexis, the news was also a source of deep anxiety. While most were loyal to Zilia, the constant barrage of Kalen's propaganda began to take its toll. Whispers in the corridors grew louder. Was the child truly Cathar? Would it be deformed? Would it be a genetic time bomb that would weaken them all? Aris saw the toll it was taking on Zilia. The joy had been replaced by a grim, embattled resolve. She was fighting a war on two fronts, a political one against Kalen and a silent internal one against the doubts of her own people. One evening, he found her in the ancestral gallery, staring at a towering hologram of her late mate, Lord Heirs. "They see his legacy being tarnished," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "They think I have betrayed him, our people, everything he died for." "You're saving what he died for," Aris said, coming to stand beside her. "Kairos died defending the Cathar from an external threat. Kalen is an internal threat. He's using tradition to poison the well to seize power for himself." "But he is using our own laws against me, Aris. Ancient purity covenants. They are real, and they give him the right to formally challenge the legitimacy of our child before the High Council." She turned to him, her golden eyes filled with a fear he had never seen before. "He can demand a Cavath Kor, a trial of bloodline. They would subject the child, once born, to genetic purity tests. Tests it would undoubtedly fail. The council could declare our child illegitimate, strip them of their inheritance, and dissolve our house." Heirs felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This went beyond politics. This was a direct threat to his child's life and future. "Then we have to discredit him," Heirs said, his voice hard. "We have to prove he's not a defender of tradition, but a self-serving tyrant who manipulated events for his own gain. The sabotage, we proved it was his agent, but we never found the source of the leak about the pregnancy." A new, chilling thought entered his mind. The saboteur was low-level. The pregnancy leak, however, was information known only to a handful of people in their innermost circle. Him, Zilia, the Med Prime, and the Vexis High Council, including Lyra and Vorlag. The saboteur had been an external threat. The leak had to have come from within. The shadow of doubt was no longer just outside their walls. It was inside the room, with them. Someone they trusted was a traitor. The realization that a traitor walked among their most trusted advisors cast a pall over House Vexis. Every shared glance became a source of suspicion, every whispered conversation a potential conspiracy. Zilia and Heirs were forced to operate in a state of quiet paranoia, trusting no one completely. Their primary suspect was Lyra, the seneschal. She had been the most vocal opponent of the Union from the beginning, her arguments always couched in the language of tradition and honor. She saw Aris's influence as a dilution of Cathar strength, a path to ruin. Her loyalty was to the idea of House Vexis, not necessarily to its current matriarch's radical decisions. Vorlag, the grizzled chief of security, was also a possibility, though a less likely one. His loyalty to Zilia seemed absolute, forged in years of service to her and her mate. Yet he was a staunch traditionalist, and the idea of a half-human heir might have been a line he could not cross. Heirs decided to approach the problem as he would any scientific mystery, by setting up an experiment. He couldn't openly accuse anyone. That would show his hand and cause chaos. He needed to bait the trap and see which rat would take the cheese. With Zilia's reluctant approval, they concocted a piece of false information. They would discover a previously unknown genetic marker in the fetus, a uniquely human sequence that, according to fabricated Terran medical records, could potentially grant the child immunity to the Cathar blight that had plagued their crops for centuries. This would transform the heir from a potential liability into the genetic savior of the entire Cathar species. It was a powerful piece of information, one that would utterly destroy Kalen's narrative if it became public. The information was logged in a high-security datapad, accessible only by Zilia's personal command codes. They then arranged a council meeting to discuss the findings. In the meeting, Zilia shared the news with her inner circle, Lyra, Vorlag, and 2 other senior council members. She swore them all to absolute secrecy, stating that they must keep this advantage hidden until the Cavath Kor trial Kalen was certain to call. The trap was set. Now they waited. Heirs had embedded a silent, undetectable tracking algorithm into the data file. If the file were accessed, copied, or transmitted, he would know. For 2 days there was nothing. The tension was unbearable. Zilia grew more withdrawn, the weight of potential betrayal heavy on her shoulders. Then, on the 3rd night, Heirs got the alert. At 0200 hours, the file was accessed from a terminal in the Seneschal's office. It was copied to an encrypted data slate. 20 minutes later, a subspace transmission, heavily masked but originating from within the Vexus spire, was sent on a tight beam frequency used for secure diplomatic communications. Its destination was a private server registered to a shell corporation. A corporation Heirs had already traced back to House Drock. The confirmation was a cold, hard knot in Oris's stomach. He went to find Zilia, his heart heavy not with triumph, but with sorrow for the pain this would cause her. He found her in the observatory, the star charts of distant galaxies painting her face in soft, shifting light. He didn't need to say a word. She saw it in his eyes. "Who?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Lyra," Heirs said softly. Zilia closed her eyes, her shoulders slumping. Lyra had served her mother before her. She had been a fixture in Zilia's life, a stern but constant presence of stability and tradition. The betrayal was not just political, it was profoundly personal. "Why?" Zilia choked out. "From what I can gather," Heirs said, pulling up the intercepted, though still encrypted communications, "she truly believes she is saving you, saving your house. She thinks you are blinded by grief and by me. She's been feeding Kalen information for months, believing he is the true defender of Cathar values. She thought he would absorb House Vexus and preserve its pure bloodline after you were deposed. She never imagined you would succeed." The doors to the observatory hissed open, and Vorlag entered, his face grim. "My lady, an urgent summons from the High Council. Lord Kalen has formally invoked the Kavath Corps. He is challenging the legitimacy of your heir and your fitness to rule. The trial is set for tomorrow at dawn." The trap had worked, but it had also sprung Kalen's. He had the false information, likely believed it to be true, and was now making his final, desperate move before Zilia could use it against him. He was forcing the confrontation. "He knows," Zilia said, her voice regaining its iron resolve. "Lyra must have told him we were holding it back. He's trying to preempt our reveal." She turned to Vorlag. "Seal the spire. No one enters or leaves. Place Seneschal Lyra under house arrest. Do not confront her. Just confine her to her quarters. She will have her own trial after this is done." Vorlag nodded, his one eye filled with a cold fire. "And the Kavath Corps, my lady?" Zilia looked from the stars to Oris. The fear he had seen in her before was gone, replaced by a warrior's calm. "We will attend," she said. "Lord Kalen wants a trial. He is about to go to war." This was the ultimate battle, not of ships or soldiers, but of ideas. It would be fought in the grand chamber of the High Council, a place of law and tradition, and Kalen, armed with centuries of precedent and the fear of a xenophobic populace, held all the advantages. But as Heirs met Zilia's determined gaze, he knew they had one thing Kalen didn't. They had the truth. And they had each other. The human's reply had stunned her months ago. Now, their combined reply would either save their future or shatter it completely. The High Council chamber was a vast, intimidating amphitheater carved from the heart of a mountain. Basalt thrones rose in tiers, occupied by the patriarchs and matriarchs of the Cathar noble houses. A single beam of light from the ceiling illuminated the central dais where the accused would stand. The air was cold and heavy with the weight of judgment. Lord Kalen stood before the assembly, radiating smug confidence. He was dressed in the formal, severe black armor of House Drock, a stark contrast to the regal but strained appearance of Lady Zilia, who stood opposite him. Heirs was relegated to an observer's gallery, a non-person in this sacred Cathar proceeding. He was the subject of the trial, but as a human, he had no voice. Kalen began, his voice echoing through the chamber. He spoke of honor, of purity, of the sacred duty to protect the Cathar bloodline. He painted a picture of Zilia as a broken widow, manipulated by a cunning alien who sought to poison their very essence. "The ancient purity covenants are clear," he thundered, pointing an accusatory finger at Zilia. "An heir must be of pure Cathar blood. Her offspring is a hybrid, an unknown quantity, a potential weakness that could unravel our entire society. I do not do this out of malice, but out of love for our people. I demand the Kavathkor be upheld. I demand this union be annulled, and the unborn child be declared illegitimate." He had the council enthralled. He was playing their ancient song, and they were all humming the tune. Zilia's defense was passionate but defensive. She spoke of survival, of the strength House Vexes had regained, of Heirs's contributions. But her words sounded hollow against Kaelin's appeal to tradition. She was arguing logistics against faith, and faith was winning. Heirs could see her faltering, her arguments failing to sway the stone-faced leaders. The neutral houses were beginning to lean in Kaelin's favor. They were losing. From his gallery, Heirs watched as the future of his family was being systematically dismantled. He had promised Zilia he would be her partner. But here, in the one place it mattered most, he was a silent spectator. "No," he thought, "I am not livestock. I am a father." He stood up. A collective gasp went through the chamber. For an observer, let alone a non-Cathar, to stand during a High Council trial was an unprecedented breach of protocol. "Human, you are out of order," the High Chancellor boomed from the central throne. "Sit down or you will be removed." "I will not," Heirs said, his voice steady and clear, amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "My child's future is being decided here. I may have no rights under your law, but I will be heard." Before the guards could move, Zilia acted. "Let him speak," she commanded, her voice ringing with newfound strength, drawing from his audacity. "He is my consort. He will speak as a representative of House Vexis." The council was in an uproar, but the ancient rules of trial allowed for a house to designate its own speakers. It was a loophole, a shocking one, but it was valid. The High Chancellor, bound by tradition, reluctantly silenced the chamber and gestured for Heirs to proceed. Heirs walked down from the gallery and stood on the dais beside Zilia. He was a head shorter than everyone in the room, clad in his simple, functional human clothing. He looked utterly insignificant. And then he began to speak. "Honorable members of the council," he began, his tone calm and respectful. "Lord Kaelin speaks of tradition and purity. He presents himself as a shield, protecting you from a foreign contamination. I am here to tell you that he is not a shield. He is a disease." A murmur of outrage rippled through the thrones. Kaelin sneered. "The primitive resorts to insults?" "Not insults, Lord Kaelin. Diagnosis," Heirs countered, his eyes scanning the council members. "I am a scientist. I deal in facts and evidence. Let's examine the evidence. Lord Kaelin claims to be a protector of Cathar ways, yet he has used sabotage to destroy the food supply of a rival house, an act that threatened the lives of thousands of Cathar citizens. Is that honorable?" He presented the evidence of the saboteur, the confession, the financial records linking the guard back to House Drock. "He claims to be a guardian of your laws," Heirs continued, his voice rising in intensity. "Yet he has engaged in a conspiracy to destabilize a fellow noble house for his own political gain. He didn't challenge Lady Zilia on the field of honor, as is your tradition. He attacked her fields, her finances, and her reputation from the shadows. Is that the Cathar way?" He then looked directly at Kaelin. "And just last night, he received a secret communication from a traitor within House Vexis, a traitor who has been his pawn all along." This was the killing blow. On the main hollow screen, Heirs displayed the evidence of Lyra's data transmission to Kaelin's shell corporation. The proof was irrefutable. Kaelin's face went pale. He had walked right into their trap. "He is not a traditionalist," Heirs declared, his voice now filling the entire chamber. "He is an opportunist. He doesn't care about Cathar purity. He cares only for Kaelin's power. He used your traditions, your fears, as a weapon to get what he wants. He poisoned crops. He lied to this council. He corrupted a loyal servant, all to seize power." Heirs then turned his attention back to the stunned council. "You fear my child. You fear what is different. You speak of purity, but purity is a myth. In biology, true purity leads to stagnation and extinction. Strength, real, lasting strength, comes from adaptation, from diversity, from embracing new ideas." He gestured to Zelia. "Your way gave you a proud history, but it was leading this house to ruin. My way, our combined way, gave it a future. We repaired her agriculture. We secured her infrastructure. We exposed her enemies. What you see as contamination, I see as a solution. My child is not an abomination. They are a symbol of the future, a bridge between two species, taking the best of both, the honor and strength of the Cathar, and the resilience and ingenuity of the human. They are not the end of your species. They are the next stage of its evolution." He fell silent. The chamber was tomb quiet. He had not just defended his child, he had put Cathar society itself on trial. He had used cold, human logic to dismantle Kaelin's entire platform, and had held up a mirror to their own self-destructive xenophobia. The High Chancellor slowly rose from his throne, his ancient face unreadable. He looked at the disgraced, speechless Lord Kaelin. He looked at Zelia, standing tall and proud. And he looked at the small, soft-skinned alien who had spoken with more honor and truth than anyone in the chamber. "The challenge of Lord Kaelin of House Drock is dismissed," the Chancellor declared, his voice like grinding stone. "His actions will be subject to a full investigation by this council. The legitimacy of the heir of House Vexis is affirmed." A wave of relief so profound washed over Zelia that she nearly collapsed. Heirs caught her arm, his grip firm and steady. Across the dais, Kaelin was being escorted away by the High Guard, his face a mask of utter ruin. As they walked from the chamber, out into the light of the twin suns, the members of the other houses stared at them, not with scorn, but with a new, grudging awe. Aris Thorne, the human scientist, had not only saved his family, he had forever changed the destiny of an entire world. Zelia looked at him, her golden eyes shining with tears she would never let fall. The pragmatic proposition she had made months ago had led to this. He was more than a mate, more than a consort. He was the anchor of her house, the father of her child, and the heart of her future. And his stunning reply had not just been an answer to her. It had been an answer for all of them. And so, the story of the alien widow and the human scientist transformed from a cold contract into a legend whispered across the stars. Their child, born with the golden eyes of the Cathar and the unyielding curiosity of a human, became not a symbol of division, but a testament to the power of unity. House Vexis didn't just survive, it flourished, leading the Cathar into a new era of innovation and understanding, forever guided by the unlikely partnership of a proud matriarch and the quiet gardener who taught her that true strength isn't found in purity, but in the courage to grow together. Their journey was a testament that sometimes the most stunning reply is one that doesn't just answer a question, but challenges the very foundation on which it was built, creating a future no one could have ever dared to imagine. What did you think of Aris's incredible gambit in the High Council? Could you feel the tension as he risked everything for his family? If their story of courage, love, and logic captivated you, please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing this video with a friend who loves epic sci-fi drama. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story from the far reaches of the galaxy. Comment below with what you think the future holds for the first human Cathar heir. Until next time, stay strong and stay curious.